Yeah, I think we're going to get started, everybody. Welcome to our 13th annual Design for Drupal and our April webinar. I do understand it is the year 2022, but our keynote this year will be a little bit later in the early summer. And so until then, we're sort of branding ourselves as still a 2021. This is our 13th anniversary, soon to be 14th. My name is Patrick Corbett. I'm the CEO at Redfin Solutions and a volunteer here at Design for Drupal, along with Leslie Glynn, who will cover announcements in just a moment. I see a bunch of new names. So for those of you who are new to Design for Drupal, this is an event devoted to Drupal design, UX, and front-end development, as well as the business and process challenges facing Drupal teams. We're typically an in-person event held every summer in Boston, Massachusetts, but in its place, we're holding these monthly webinars on various Drupal design and front-end topics. We're supported by a great team of volunteers, including Catherine Carruthers handling our video and Catherine Waldron, who manages our social media and mailings. And I will turn things over to Leslie Glynn for some announcements. Leslie.
Thank you, Patrick. Welcome, everybody. Great to see everybody on this month's webinar. We're really looking forward to it. This month's webinar is with Tearyne, and Patrick will do the introduction shortly. The webinar is Devops for front-end developers who can't back-end good enough and want to learn to understand other good stuff too. We'll get to that in a minute. We do want to, again, this is still on our 2021 year. Preston was our keynote speaker last summer. Just want to make sure that people are aware if they haven't joined these webinars before. Preston did a great talk on voice content. Does your content speak for itself? He does have a book out, which I've listed on the screen here. And there is a recording. If you go to the Design for Drupal YouTube channel, you can see Preston's keynote from last year, as well as all of the webinars that we've been doing since 2020. So they're all on the Design for Drupal channel. The ongoing Drupal contributions, contributing back to the Drupal project is very important to the team at Design for Drupal Boston. So there are different Slack channels that you can contribute to. There's the hashtag admin UI, that's for the Claro, the new admin theme. D9- theme is for the Olivero theme that will replace Bartik in the near future. Easy Out of the Box is another initiative where newcomers are welcome to join and help make an easier product for Drupal when people first install it. And I am one of the project leads, along with Chris Wells from Redfin, for the Project Browser Strategic Initiative. Would love to have folks join that channel. If you're new to Drupal, if you're a site builder, or if you're an experienced Drupalist, you're welcome to join us and help us make a better browsing experience within the Drupal product for browsing for modules. Everybody's welcome to contribute. Design, front-end, theming, coding, documentation, testing, accessibility, everything. There's a diversity and inclusion group that you can contribute to as well, which Tearyne's very involved with. And there are mentors available. So just ask for help in any of these channels and somebody will lead you to something that's of interest to you to help contribute. Upcoming webinar series, we do have another webinar scheduled in May, on May 11th. The title is Crayons Down, Accessibility for UX is More Than Contrast. That is with Donna Bungard. So we look forward to having you there. You can go to the Design for Drupal website and sign up for that webinar now. Community events, the big one coming up is DrupalCon North America, April 25th to 28th in Portland, Oregon. There's going to be a lot of great talks there. I'm doing one for the event organizers working group. There are a lot of front-end design talks that are going to be there. If you can't make it, you know, there will be videos to see, you know, a while after the event takes place. And I believe Tearyne has a couple of talks that she's doing at DrupalCon as well. Other community events. Now, some of these, we're getting more in-person events, which is great, but there are still some online and virtual and some hybrid events as well. So May 27th is Drupal Camp New Jersey. That's an in-person event one day. Drupal Camp Poland 2022 is in person from May 20th to 29th. Drupal Jam is on June 1st. That is both online and in person in the Netherlands. June 3rd to 5th is Drupal Camp Spain. That's in person. And the 23rd to 26th is Drupal Mountain Camp in Switzerland. That's in person. And then In the US, there's Drupal Camp Asheville in person in Asheville, North Carolina from July 8th to 10th. We have a lot of international folks that join these webinars, so that's why I make sure to cover all the international events as well as the events in North America. And we're glad that everybody is able to join from all around the world for our virtual webinars here. There's a community events page on Drupal.org where you can find everything I just mentioned, plus all the local events, contribution events. There's a lot of information on that page. It's drupal.org/community/events. So go check that out. Code of conduct. It's very important that we follow the Drupal code of conduct in virtual as well as in-person events, making sure everybody feels welcome and included. If there are any issues, contact Patrick or myself. We don't anticipate any. But the code of conduct, if you want to read it, is in the footer of the Design for Drupal Boston website. We need your help, as Patrick said. It's him, myself, Patrick, and then Catherine and Catherine. We can definitely use more help, website developers, social media, design. So just reach out if you want to get some contribution credit by helping us organize this event. Thank you to the gold digital sponsors, Redfin Solutions, and to all our other sponsors for 2021, Atten, Dev Collaborative, Talking Drupal, Acquia, Esteemed, Kalamuna, Evolving Web, Canopy Studios, Pantheon, 108 Degrees, McPhee Design. We will be looking soon because we're flipping over to our 2022 when we have our keynote and our, what usually is our in-person event. It will be a one-day event with more details to follow, but we will be looking for a new set of, hopefully a lot of these ones will renew, and then anybody else that wants to sponsor these webinars, you get, mentioned in the emails and the social media, during the webinar. So if your company would like to help sponsor these events, please reach out to me and let us know. Spread the word today event on social media. Our hashtag is #D4D Boston. The Q&A will be at the end of the session after Tearyne presents. The Q&A feature, if you use that in Zoom, that's where we'll be reading the Q&A questions from. We typically turn the chat feature off during the webinars. That's really just to chat amongst ourselves and not to actually ask the questions. I think that's about it. Let me just go and make sure. Yep, that's it. So I'm going to turn it back over to Patrick, and he is going to introduce Tearyne.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. Today's speaker is Tearyne Almendariz. Tearyne has designed, prototyped, and coded user interfaces with teams small and large. She is currently employed as a developer advocate at Pantheon and previously worked for Lullabot and Bright Plum. She serves as a lead of the Drupal Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, and she is a certified professional in accessibility core competencies with the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. When she joined her first large-scale production team, she was relatively unfamiliar with DevOps. But since then, she's learned a lot working with a number of talented developers. And with this talk, she aims to help others to similarly level up their DevOps knowledge and their skill sets. Welcome to Design4Drupal, Tearyne, and take it away.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everyone for such a warm welcome and asking me to be here. I'm excited to bring this concept to y'all because I know how much I struggled when I was going into my first large-scale production team, as Patrick said in my introduction. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. I think we have to unshare this one. Cool. Y'all forgive me. I am a Windows user. I was given a Mac machine, so I do pretty good most of the time. But here we go.
Looks good.
I'm just kidding. Awesome. All right, so my talk is DevOps for front-end developers who can't back-end good and want to learn to understand other stuff good too. This is going to have some Zoolander references. The title is a Zoolander reference. I was checking for different types of talks and names that I could add on, and this one resonated with people. So we're going to have fun while we talk about difficult topics because that's the best way to get through it, in my opinion. So I will start out with this question for y'all. Have you ever wondered if there was more to life other than being really, really ridiculously good at making good looking front ends? You can through DevOps. So there's a Q&A in Zoom. Make sure that if you have your questions, you put it in the Q&A section. But just to introduce myself just a tad bit more, we have these slides at Pantheon where we show the human sides of ourselves. As was said, I am a developer advocate at Pantheon. I'm 9 Lives Black Cat on Drupal.org. I did not realize they were going to post my internet name on my badge, so it's just kind of stuck. On Twitter, I'm Tearyne D. I live in Dallas, Texas. I was born in Chicago, raised in Michigan, but y'all will hear me say y'all a lot. And things that I enjoy when I'm not at a computer, they're studying Japanese, konnichiwa minasan, baking, I just made lemon bars last night, and also cycling and spin classes. I just hit my 100th class recently, so that was exciting. As Leslie mentioned, I will be speaking on behalf of the Drupal Diversity and Inclusion Initiative at DrupalCon. There are 2 talks. They also have long names. I listened to a lot of Fall Out Boy in high school. One is called A New Normal, Using the Ashes of the Pandemic to Nurture More Inclusive Ways of Working. That will be 2:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Tuesday during the Nonprofit Summit, as well as Inequity and Isolation, which covers inclusive practices for remote teams. That one will be at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Thursday. So what is DevOps? That's the reason why you came here. Some of y'all know, some of y'all don't. I try to make sure that we're not going too far into lingo. DevOps is short for Development Operations. With DevOps, you are engaging in the work of development for the web as a collaborative, shared approach to your tasks. It's performed by your development teams, your IT ops teams. It's an iterative approach to software development. You've got automation, infrastructure deployment, maintenance, all of the stuff that comes after the fun part of front-end development, which us front-end developers get to engage in. So as a front-end developer, why should you be interested in DevOps? To me, it was some of the more difficult things that I learned. It wasn't the most visible parts. Some reasons why you should care about and learn more about DevOps is that even if you're not the one that's going to be building the building tools, you want to understand how the process works so that you know how your work is going to get engaged in that cycle. We'll cover some of the ways that you can make your front-end files set up better so that you can work with your teams, because that is going to help you improve your communications with your ops teams, your backend developers, and other non-front-end teammates. A great concept that is out there right now that we're pioneering as Pantheon is WebOps. So you've got your DevOps and your WebOps, and that's going to involve people who might be marketers that are coming in, that know that they need a website up, they know that they got to give you designs, and they know that you've got to do it, but you have to understand how you are getting all of your work linked in. Just 2 more things. As a front-end developer, and this is for me personally, when I learned more about DevOps, I had more competency, but I also had a greater sense of confidence in the work that I was doing. I could confidently say, well, yes, I've set up my files so that you can use them. When I was asked questions about my code, apologies, I have 2 dogs. When I was asked questions about my code and how it would work and interface with everyone else's work, I could respond back intelligently, be able to answer questions. I didn't feel as much of an imposter on my team. And it also can help with your career progression. Plus, you can become an ambi developer. Not to be confused with a full stack developer, because that's a Zoolander reference. Not an ambi turner, can't turn left. There's an Easter egg in these slides. I'm curious if anyone will pick up on it. So this is just an illustration of some of the things that we are going to discuss. This was a DevOps services diagram that was done by Hoster C. For the dev side, us, you've got your build stage, your code, your planning, and your testing. Now on the ops side, you've got the release, deploy, operate, and monitor. We'll get into that. But why is DevOps critical? This is about when is it that you should be engaging in DevOps. At least when I started out, there was MySpace and there was Neopets, and I could just put my code up on the web, just upload it to angelfire.com. I might be aging myself right now, right? There was no CICD. I just put my HTML, sometimes PHP when I was getting fancy senior year of high school, and it would go. But DevOps is critical to put in your development processes when you have a team that's more than a few people. If it's not just you and a partner, right? You do need to have some kind of version control. So you're not writing over each other's files, right? It facilitates collaboration between people. The first place that I worked at, we had a team of maybe 4 to 6 people. When I moved over to the finance industry, I was a team member in a department of multiple teams, right? And so being able to get the work done and integrate with all the different APIs and services that were coming in, we can't just upload via FTP in those cases, right? Another time that you want to do this is for projects with sophisticated relationships. Looking at us Drupal developers, when you're working with your CMSs, you have all these different things that are coming in. It might be that your site is making calls to multiple APIs. If you're building a website for a city park infrastructure, right, you might be getting data from weather.com. You should be getting data from your city services. You might even be getting stuff from state and local governments. Those are the sophisticated relationships that you need to be able to manage, and DevOps will help you do that. And the last one, if you have a site that has a lot of regular traffic, so if you've got 100,000 visitors that are coming every so often, or if you're someone like a nonprofit with a targeted giving campaign, or you manage a department that is responding to world events, right? You're going to have these traffic spikes that come in, and having a sophisticated DevOps infrastructure set up will save you a lot of time, headaches from your site going down. So that's how front-end development is supported by DevOps. When we have our small niche sites and web applications or personal projects that we have, we can do like push to live architectures, but we'll get in here a bit. I'm going to move to the next slide. So you can just decide to opt out of DevOps. What if you don't decide to do DevOps principles? You're going to put your large application just straight on your website. You just want to FTP everything into live, not test anything. Sorry, my dog is sniffing me right now. I worked at a place that engaged in this kind of structure many moons ago. Whenever we wanted to do version control, we just kind of copied the files onto our computer. That's the royal we. When we did that, this is what happened. So for folks that cannot see the recording right now, this is a clip from Zoolander. That is when he is showing the Derek Zoolander School for kids who can't read good and want to do other things good too. If you have a website for ants, it's gonna fall apart. There were times where we decided that we were going to host our site ourselves. We were not going to engage in a DevOps infrastructure. And then we would send out an email blast to 14,000 people and tell them, hey, your benefits are all here right now. Log in right now. And it crashed the site. Hundreds of requests all coming in at once to this small server. When we got lucky, it was just a white page. It went down. But you can see how experiences like that would hurt your credibility with your users. As front-end developers, we often get tasked with, okay, well, this thing is not working, please figure out why. Because people will assume that, oh, it must be something with your design. I also included that GIF because a lot of people were tweeting me, what is this, a website for ants? And my husband's like, why do people keep asking you if you're making Drupal for ants? So that's the story behind that GIF. So we're going to move on to one of the parts of DevOps, CICD. This stands for continuous integration and continuous delivery or deployment. So there are different stages in your CI/CD workflow. You've got your 4 stages of source, like for your source code, build, test, and deployment. This flow is so important because it allows you to check for any kinds of errors, discrepancies, or deviations from the team or project's conventions. In Drupal, we have a Drupal way to do our code, to get that code out, because we are an open source community. And so we have to have agreements for, if we are going to work on this together, this is how we're going to do it. If you are coming from a background where you did things yourself, or you and another person were just kind of scrapping things together. You just did it as you went along. But when you have to share that knowledge with others, when you have to train another front-end developer to come in as you progress in your career, you become a more senior developer. You need to be able to communicate what the standards and expectations are so that everyone can work together and have, less communication snafus. This also enables you to respond better to needed changes and challenges that might come up. So with your stages of development source, here's some source tools that you can use. GitLab, GitHub. You might have Git repos on a service. I bring this up because at Pantheon, this is what we have. You will upload your code either through the command line interface, CLI, or you can do it through the SMFTP. I think it's SMFTP. I had not used that one. But it doesn't give you as much insight into your code, but it is a way of working. There's also Azure repos and the AWS code commit. Those ones I'm not as familiar with. I did use Azure repos as I worked at a Azure development shop. But all of these tools, again, allow you to check for any errors or discrepancies, deviations from the team or project conditions even. You might have secrets that you have to manage, and I think that we will talk about that shortly here. But one of the great things about using your source tools is that if you're using an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, you can connect directly to these source tools and be able to see in PHP Storm, I was told by a backend developer at Florida Drupal Camp, it's called Annotate. In VS Code, where I was using it, it was get blamed, but you can find out who was it that put this line of code in here so I can ask questions. Don't blame people. It's called get blamed, but try to work holistically with your teammates. All right, so for your build stage, these are the places where your code is going to get built out. Now this can be Docker containers and it can be software builds. I don't know why I blinked right there, but these are the places where your code will go once it goes from source to here's where you're going to be, going to build the code out, become your application, become your site. Now, an important part of our experiences, especially as front-end developers, is going to be testing. There are going to be a ton of different ways that you can do this and engage with it. I got to go to some really great talks at our local Women Who Code chapter in Dallas, led by Jen, that cover things like Jenkins, Travis CI, Azure pipelines. For Pantheon, we have Autopilot and Build Tools products that are available. So you can go in and understand these automated tests so I'm stopping to understand and articulate the process out. When you are doing your code, there are going to be expectations that you have set up, right? If I am sending a request to an API to bring me back data, I need or I expect for this to happen. When I go to render this particular feature or component on my Drupal site, this is what I expect to happen. Automated tests in this part of your continuous integration, continuous development pipeline will be able to tell you without having to manually go in there, and it will save you time and be able to communicate with folks. Hey, I know that you asked me to bring back the summary of all the users who were registered, but this test failed. This is not performing as expected. You catch these things early on in your processes, and if something changes with an app that is already working, you'll get a notification about that too if you've tested your code properly. And the last stage here of CICD is deployment. Now, there are all different kinds of deployment. Deployment types can include infrastructure provisioning, configuration, and also containerization. I'll go over these a bit for blue-green deployment, rolling deployment, canary deployment, and in-place deployments. With blue-green deployments, this technique reduces the amount of downtime that your site can experience and the risk by running two different identical production environments. They're called blue and green. So once you've deployed and fully tested your software in the green development environment, you switch the router so that all of your incoming requests go to the green development environment deployment environment instead of blue. So your green deployment environment is now the live one and blue is idle. So in this case, your new instance gets deployed, the old version gets taken out. With rolling deployments, this is a deployment strategy that slowly replaces previous versions of an application. So in blue-green, you just switched out entire environments. Rolling deployment slowly replaces your previous versions of your application with new versions of the application. This is through replacing the infrastructure on which the application is running. And again, these are like high-level overviews. I would love to do like a continuing webinar series on this so that we can get deeper into this if this is something that people are interested in. Just trying to get people familiar with these different terms, because I know that they were very foreign and unfamiliar to me when I started working in these kinds of environments. The last part about rolling deployment strategies is that the containers run previous versions of the application and they get replaced one by one with containers that run new versions of the application. For a canary deployment, you've got, this is a deployment strategy where you release an application or service incrementally, just like in rolling, but to a subset of users. This is the lowest risk prone of different deployment models actually, compared to all the other ones because of the level of control that it gives you. Kind of going back to the example that I had where we had 14,000 people that were emailed all at once and told to come into the site. If you just have like 1,000 of those people use one version of your application, and then the next 2,000 people get another version, it stacks it and it kind of staggers the traffic that you get. Finally is in-place deployment. These are updates to the application version without replacing any kind of infrastructure components. The previous version of the application on each computer resource is stopped. The latest application is installed and a new version of the application is started and validated. This allows application deployments to proceed with minimal disturbance to your underlying infrastructure. So that's a whole lot. I will definitely share slides with folks in case they wanted to look into this more. I can include links for more information in case you want to deep dive into it. So for structuring your projects, this is for you, the front-end developer, to understand with all these different deployment strategies, things that are coming up with, you know, your testing, your building, how should you structure your projects? I initially was just setting things up where I hard-coded a lot of lines of code. I'm going to explain to you why that is not a good idea, especially when it comes to your API calls. So first things first, do not use your production API for your dev and test environments. Frequently, when you are using a production API, you are paying for that API. There was, in the finance industry where I worked, we were making calls out to be able to query folks' addresses and things of that nature. When we were doing our tests, we were being charged per request. So you can use things like Swagger, you can build test APIs. Your backend developer can build the test APIs. I was blessed to have a very great backend developer that taught me about how to set up Swagger, how to tell her how the data model should be set up, how to communicate the expectations that I needed for the application to work. But she also explained to me, stop connecting to the production API. You're charging us a lot of money. She was stern, but she was very, very clear about what the impacts were. Secrets are the next item for your file setup. Secrets are going to be your private keys and tokens. Those are what you're using for authenticating with cloud-based services. So if you need to sign into your AWS, you have secrets. GitHub Actions uses secrets for a lot of different integrations that you might want to use. We use Orbit for some really cool things here at Pantheon to be able to help track and communicate with our community members. And so I've set up a whole lot of really cool GitHub Actions, but I have to go in and set up the secrets so that it knows, hey, this is Tearyne Almendariz. She has permission to come into here, look at this data, get it back from the service. And so LinkedIn my app puts out the handshake and LinkedIn's like, oh, okay, I see that this is Tearyne. She knows the secret handshake. Now you all have my secret handshake with LinkedIn recorded. Just kidding. And finally, your environmental variables. Your environmental variables are going to be for your dev, test, live. You can actually set that up in your code and in your file setup, where when your code detects which environment that it is on, it will know, oh, well, if I'm looking for all the images and I'm on the dev environment, I'm not going to go to the production environments stuff. I'm going to look for these specific files that Tearyne said, right? Because we as front-end developers, we don't necessarily want to have to download all like 20,000 images that are on a server, right? If we're just trying to build our prototype and proofs of concept, minimum viable products for our applications, we just want to show, hey, this is how it works. This is how it's set up. Your environmental variables will help you with routing your requests to the different areas that people will expect the data from. Some really cool tools for this are Swagger. I did not include a link to Swagger, but it's a very great tool for displaying on the UI what the data model will look like, what you should expect to get back, and you can actually run some tests from there. Another thing to consider in your project structure as a front-end developer is your CSS. Now, your CSS is going to need to be compiled, minified, and optimized. You shouldn't be just pushing raw Sass files, the .scss files that you have. You shouldn't be pushing those to your development environment. You should be compiling them, minifying them, optimizing them, because that will make your code run much more smoothly, much more quickly. But a decision that you have to make and that you have to communicate with your teammates, whether that's front-end developers, back-end developers, or DevOps people, is where are you going to compile? Now, there are a lot of different opinions on how to do this. Even if you're working at an agency, from project to project, it might vary depending on the kind of infrastructure and knowledge on your team that you have. Will you compile on your local machine, or do you compile on dev? There are scripts that you can use to compile on your development servers if that's what you decide to do. Are you going to use Gulp? Are you going to use NPM? GitHub Actions is an option to be able to do that. Pantheon, we have build tools that are available. The product is called Build Tools. But all of these different options are available to you, but you do have to speak with your teammates to decide on the options so that you can meet everyone where they're at and that everybody has a shared understanding. You don't have a junior developer like me that's like, no, I just uploaded the stat, or I just uploaded my CSS. And it's like, no, we don't upload the style.css file directly, Tearyne. You just overloaded and overwrote everyone's codes and styles. So that has happened. I like to share the times where I kind of have messed up, because I want everybody else to know you are human. You will mess up and it is okay. Just have information about how you can do better and work with folks better. And then my final point here is about DevOps and accessibility. Some people do not realize that you can use DevOps to help your accessibility practices. As y'all heard, I'm a certified accessibility practitioner. It's very important for me. And working in some of the agencies that I have, I discovered like so many tools for being able to do this as an automated process. If folks don't know, I was going to say, as you might know, that's not inclusive. If folks don't know, you can set up your accessibility through, I apologize, the dog is here. So I'm trying to talk and he's nudging me with his nose. My bad. You can do manual accessibility testing and you can do automated accessibility testing. There's this pervasive notion right now, as people are starting to understand that accessibility is truly important, that no, we can automate all the things. There are things that you do have to manually test. And if you set up automation for your accessibility testing, that will save you so much more time to be able to do those mission critical manual accessibility tests that have to be done. There are things like automated testing that we have that are in our browsers, but also through the command line. There's also visual regression testing. Front-end developers, there's no more, okay, I'm gonna push up the code and then take a screenshot, but did I remember to take the screenshot? Oh, I don't know, let me go back. There are tools for this. Pantheon has a tool called Autopilot. Lullabot has a tool called Tugboat. If folks know of other ones, I had two other ones that I forgot to put on the slide, but if you have a automated visual regression tool that you like, feel free to post it in the chat and share that knowledge with each other. You can also set up scripts to run things like Pally. So it's like friendly ally. This is a screenshot. I can see if I can pull up this video. There's a very great tutorial from a user called Fen on Medium. Sorry, it's on Medium, but she talks about how to automate web accessibility testing. I am going to hopefully switch tabs here. No, I don't think I can. But there's a great video that she has set up where it shows you how you can put your sites and addresses that you would like to test into the interface, your command line interface, and it will run the test for you, tell you exactly what the issues are, where it can be found. It's very powerful. I used it to test sites by putting together the site maps and just having the reports actually compile into an individual folder. But this is another powerful DevOps tool. I know that we covered a lot of things here, but I just want you to remember, you don't have to know it all. There's so many resources, especially when you're in the Drupal community. There's a Drupal Slack channel that's for accessibility. There are projects like Olivero, which are built intentionally to have inclusive, accessible front ends. One of the reasons why I've stayed a Drupal developer, even though sometimes it is painful, is because we have a community of people that will help you along your way. I was fortunate enough to have senior developers both in and out of Drupal that supported me. And as Hans says in Zoolander, do I know what I'm doing today? No, but I'm here and I'm gonna give it my best shot. That's what I've got, folks. Thanks.
Thanks, Tearyne. That was great. I'm going to open it up for questions. People can post it to the Q&A, and Tearyne will answer any and all of your questions, or at least most of them anyway. I have a quick question while we're waiting. What is the difference, for a smaller team who maybe has, less than 10 people or even less than 5 people, or maybe it's just 2 people, or maybe it's just 1 person, versus a bigger, shop that maybe have a lot of resources? How might you approach and recommend resources for one group versus another?
So for me, the first thing that I would suggest is to understand what the skill sets of the people on your team are and how much time that you have available for yourselves, especially for intentional learning. Because I know sometimes when you're working at an agency versus if you're working at a product-oriented, on a product-oriented project, you might have a time constraint, right? So there's a difference between, do I take the time to learn how to build the script myself, or do I go with this automated service that can do this and I go ahead and I pay the money for that? I think another thing to think of is if you and your team have time for mentorship. Some teams do have time for mentorship, and that can be based on timelines, that can be based on availability. Some teams do not. So those are the top 2 considerations, I would say.
That's great. We have a couple questions. One, thank you so much for your presentation. Could you minify your CSS during build time as well?
Yes, there are scripts that allow you to do that. Yes.
Great. And the other question from Joseph, is there a recommended best practice of source control for the database?
Oh, the database. That sounds to me like a back-end question. So I do not know that I know the answer to that.
I don't know
Apologies.
that I know either. Let us know, Joseph, if you find out. Those are the two questions I have so far. I don't know if anyone else has any. One person was asking about how to reach out to us. I just answered that in our chat. So Boston at Design4Drupal.org is how to get in touch with us if anyone is wanting to volunteer or reach out for presentation recommendations. And Leslie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the Tearyne had put in the link to the video that she wasn't able to share. That is in the chat as well, how to automate web accessibility testing. So grab that from the chat before that ends. We'll also post that on the webinar page on Design4Drupal.org, so you can get a reference to that as well. And Patrick, I think there's another question that's come in.
Sure. Is it no longer advisable to do a multi-site setup for Drupal? You know, in reference to how Pantheon does it these days.
Yes. That is a bit of a live wire question. It depends on what you and your team are comfortable with. I have heard a lot of no's. So.
And then the follow-up, are containers the future?
Containers are the future. Not
that
sure
was,
that.
it's sort of a comment, it looks like, but
okay.
Yep. All right, I think those are the two questions so far. So you can take it away again, Leslie.
All right, I want to thank you, Tearyne. That was a great presentation. There was a lot of things in there that I didn't know, so very, very helpful. Thank you. While we have a few more minutes, is there anything that you want to talk about with your initiative for the Drupal diversity and inclusion, you know, how folks can chip in there? Would you like to spend a few minutes on that?
Yes, thank you so much. The Drupal Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, I actually just became the initiative lead last April, so I'm closing out my first year. We are looking for volunteers. We've actually come up with a vision for our interactions for this next year. One of the things that as initiative lead, I wanted to focus on after this last 2 years that we've been spending apart, working under all this stress, is how we can do things that are restorative and rebuild people to deal with all of, it's been a difficult 2 years. So if you would like to join us to help us build more inclusive pathways for folks, get more information out there for how people can both reset themselves, their organizations, their relationships, or if you just want to have fun at our board game night that is going to be on Tuesday at DrupalCon, please, please, please come join us. I will drop a link for our homepage, drupaldiversity.com. We will also be hosting our second annual DDI camp, Drupal Diversity Inclusion Camp. It will be a virtual event. We just decided that we are going to host that in September this year. We just want to make sure that people who are underrepresented in the margins have the ability to talk and give space for the things that they experience. We had a really cool one last year, Leslie, where someone did a talk based around development and inclusion, but they included like TikTok dance memes. So people, as they were able to get up, dance, move around. We had a talk from a veteran who talked about how, even though he was disabled, becoming a Drupal developer helped him regain a sense of purpose. It was such a beautiful talk. And we had a lot of talks that came in about how to support people with ADHD, which I personally, a person with ADHD, super appreciated. So yeah.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Patrick's going to hop back on. There is an additional question, Patrick, that just popped up.
One more. Let's see. MDOD said, thank you for your excellent presentation. If you had to redo one of your previous Drupal projects, what changes would you make and why?
Thank you, MDOD. I like this question a lot. I would probably redo my approach to the Drupal 7 site that we set up for our pension portal. I think that there were a lot of ways that it was very successful. But I also think that there were ways that we could have served our audience better, given them a better experience. I was still learning Drupal at the same time. It was my first job out of college. And so I knew how the front end should look. But I also realized as we were working through it, for the city that I worked at, most of the people who worked for the city and supported the pension fund and needed that website were in lower classes. They were in the streets department, the parks department, the water department. They weren't sitting in offices every day like me, right? Where they had a large computer screen. They were accessing it through their phones. And so I really think that I would have, if I had been on the team at the beginning, I would have tried to set this up with a better mobile first approach in all aspects of it, but especially that pension portal that we had, because seeing the impact of being able to help a person who worked for the city from the time that they graduated high school for 36, sometimes 40 years, sometimes people would stay past their retirement age. Seeing the impact that being able to personally go in and get their information had, that was one of my proudest moments, and I just wish I could have helped more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's always true. You can always improve, but sometimes doing your best is all you can do. And as long as you learn from your mistakes and identify improvements moving forward, it's what counts.
Yeah, they switched to Drupal 8, so I'm proud of them.
I have another question. We got a little bit more time. In regards to your Drupal diversity team, do you have a project you were working on, and can you talk about that?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Joan. We are currently working on, like right now, all of our time is sucked into DrupalCon, getting our presentations out there, supporting our folks that are going to the conference. Our next focus is going to be on DDI Camp. We have seen that people really want to work on the events that bring people together. I think the other thing that we might be engaging in is migrating, which is going to be kind of a redo of our site. It is currently hosted on Drupal 7. It needs to go over to Drupal 8. So if folks want to help with that, that would be fantastic.
Let's see. I think Abigail Bowman is raising their hand, but I don't know if they actually have a question. If you have a question, please post it in the Q&A section. Give her a second just to. In the meantime, with regards to upgrades to Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, are there any DevOps considerations specific to going from 8 to 9?
I'm thinking about this. DevOps considerations. Understanding how you're going to deal with your composer workflows is important. Making sure that your modules are supported, how you are going to do those updates. So I'm a new developer advocate, so I'm always like, am I selling to people or am I telling them about the things that we use? We have tools at Pantheon that will help you do managed updates to your composer updates for your projects. But it is a thing that you need to keep an eye on, because things that were supported in Drupal 8, your modules might not necessarily be supported in Drupal 9. And it is something that you're going to want to talk with your team about, especially if you have a multi-site approach and or like based off a particular template, because there might be times that you are doing your updates to your core, but you might not necessarily want to your Drupal core, but you might not necessarily want to update your modules yet. So just keeping an eye on that. Yes, hopefully that was helpful.
We have one more question. What's your go-to resource or resources for DevOps and or front-end development?
Honestly, Twitter. Twitter is where I will go after I do my Google, right? I go to Stack Overflow, I look at the Drupal community answers, and then if I get really super stuck, I either will go to Twitter and plead for help. No, I go to the Twitter community because I've seen a lot of folks being helpful there. Also the Drupal Slack community, so super helpful. One thing that I would suggest to anyone, front-end developer, back-end developer, even just a marketing person that wants to learn more about the web, find someone who will be your peer or mentor in the process, because there are always people that want to learn and that want to help other people learn. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, like especially not in our community, because people do want to help you grow and be better. We're open source.
Yeah, I agree. Drupal's a great spot for that.
Right.
Hands down.
Yep. And another great thing to do is to contribute. Go to a local meetup, contribute to, something, or just join a Slack channel. There's so many helpful people, but I found that contributing, getting to know people who could then point you in directions for different things that you were looking for information on or help with. So contribution is a win-win for everybody. Helps the Drupal project and it helps you. So I would definitely recommend people doing that.
All right. A lot of thank yous from Benjamin. I think that's all the questions we have.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Tearyne. It was very, very informative. And I'm sure many folks will go to the Design4Drupal website, where we have all of our webinars and links to all the recordings. So if you have colleagues or friends that weren't able to make it today, definitely share that information with them.
All right. Thanks, Tearyne, so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.